shared, I'm only about, I'm actually walking distance from here. I live there, our church is there, and we've been church planting in the area for about 10 years. So I want to be, I'll introduce a little bit about it as we go along here. I'm going to read from Jeremiah 29. I think this is probably familiar to a lot of you because this is your theme verse. I'm going to read from Jeremiah 29, 4 through 7. Jeremiah 29, 4 through 7. It says, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles, whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." This is the word of God. As you start your residency, as you embark on this time of intense study about the city and what God is doing in the city around the world, you know you're doing so in a time of really enormous changes that's going on in our world. There's a couple of changes. First is globalization. The world has become an increasingly smaller place. As was shared, I'm a missionary kid. I grew up in Kenya, in Nairobi. When my parents first moved from Korea, they moved from Seoul, South Korea, and moved the whole family over to this halfway around the world, to Nairobi, Kenya. It felt like, and it seemed like it was a move to a different planet, right? I was 10 years old at the time, and this was back in the early 80s. Back at that time, when people made a move like that, it was for life, right? Because they weren't thinking of going back, because the places that they were thinking about was so far away from each other. Now in the 21st century, Kenya isn't that far away. Our mental maps have changed. We can have FaceTime with people in Kenya anytime that we want to, because of the internet and Google and Facebook, Twitter, you can get news coming out of Kenya even faster than people in Kenya themselves get it. Just this past weekend, some really horrible things happened in Kenya, walking distance from where I grew up. I'm on the computer getting news from people, and they're passing this news on, and you're getting it almost real time. So, world has changed, and it's much smaller than it used to be. People travel back and forth between U.S. and Kenya all the time now, and they have a life here in U.S. and they have a life back there, and another kind of life back there, and this phenomenon called transnational identity has arisen. Where people have different identities and they come from and they identify themselves with different countries. I once read the story of a taxi driver. He's the vice president, and his wife is the president of a taxi cab company in New York. But once a year, he and his wife go back to his birthplace in Ghana, and he oversees the harvest festivals of 5 villages as a chief in his 10-room palace. And he gets all dressed up in all of the splendor of the traditional regalia of a king. So he does this, and then he packs it all back up, and then he comes back to New York City, and then he drives a cab. And so his wife says, you know, when I go to Africa, I have to worship him. When I get back, he has to worship me. Right? So one life there, another life here. The second change that's afoot is urbanization. Around the year 2007, for the first time in human history, there are more people now living in cities than in rural areas. And the place where this, the first change that I mentioned to you, globalization, is felt and seen the most is in the cities. Cities around the world, they're filled, for example, with very diverse communities that hail from everywhere. There are countless neighborhoods all across the globe that look like the Italian market neighborhood right here in Philadelphia. In South Philly, where Rocky Balboa used to live. But if he were living there today, he wouldn't only be living next door to other Italian Americans, he'd also be living next to Vietnamese immigrants, Mexican immigrants, Lebanese immigrants, and people from everywhere, right? And it is this global urban world that you are learning about and that you are being called into. That's what you're doing, as you're studying here in this place. And in some ways, all of these massive changes, it just sometimes it feels overwhelming, and it is. But we have an ancient message here that can help us see the way forward as God's people in today's cities, in the words of the prophet Jeremiah. First thing that we see here is that the city that is being referred to, the city whose peace, whose welfare, whose good God's people are told to seek by Jeremiah, is a big, bad city. And it's hostile to God's people. It's the city of Babylon. City of Babylon. And here's a little background to the story. In 588 BC, the Babylonian army of King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Jerusalem. And he came in and broke down the walls, he plundered the city, and came into the temple and took all of the gold from the temple and enslaved most of the citizens of Jerusalem, including the ruling class, and chained them all up, marched them 1,000 miles away to the city of Babylon. And so here is this exiled people of God, and they're living now in Babylon, and you can kind of just imagine what they're feeling. They're traumatized, they're culture shocked, they're completely confused about what God is doing. What in the world is God doing? How can He let this happen? Many of them were just living, waiting, and hoping for the day when God is going to rescue them out of this evil city, right? And bring them back to Jerusalem, to the days of old, like He did for Moses and out of the land of Egypt. So they're saying, let's go, God. We got to get back. And so they're just waiting for that. And Prophet Jeremiah writes this letter to this group in Babylon from Jerusalem, and he tells them, "You're not coming back. You're not coming back. In fact, you're not coming back anytime soon. In fact, the return is going to happen, but it's going to happen in 70 years. It's going to happen in 70 years. And that's a lifetime. It's at least a couple of generations, right? So he says, look, forget about coming back. You need to settle down there. Settle down. Now, Prophet Jeremiah, right? What he's saying is, don't get homesick. Don't spend all of your life longing for the days gone by. Because the good old days in Jerusalem that you remember are gone. Gone. And in fact, just kind of like the Christian Bible-believing American society is gone. Don't long for that time, because it's gone. You can't go back. You live in Babylon now. So make your home here. Make your home here. So how are you supposed to live as God's people in Babylon? Babylon. Jeremiah doesn't tell them to mount an insurrection. He doesn't say, go rally at the picket lines and protest the evil injustices of Babylon. Don't become an anarchist. that's going to be bringing down the Babylon system. You know, that's not what you're doing. A lot of us like that idea, you know, but Jeremiah says, no, that's not how you're supposed to be doing. You're going about doing things. He also doesn't say, keep yourself separate from the Babylonian society, right? It doesn't say, become monks and nuns and lock yourselves away in a convent, in a monastery, in religious fortresses, you know, out in the boonies somewhere, away from the people, and become isolated because this place is evil and it's going to influence you badly. So, you know, get out of here. It doesn't say that either. Jeremiah also doesn't say assimilate into Babylon. You know, since you are here, become a Babylonian. Lose your distinctive identity as God's people and become the same as other people. Remove anything about yourself that might seem offensive to the people around you. Right? And what you need to do is convince yourself and others that you aren't all that different. Instead, the prophet tells them, this is God's word for you. Seek the peace of Babylon. Be God's people in that hostile city and live for its good, for its prosperity, for its peace. And you know that word peace is shalom in Hebrew, and it's in English it's peace. Kind of a lot of times it kind of conjures up fields where everything is quiet and there's a brook babbling and you know nothing's happening and you know I just want some peace and quiet. You know, especially if you've been with some toddlers or whatever, but you just want some peace and quiet. But in Hebrew, that word is so much richer than just simply peace. It has in view reconciliation, healing, redemption, and flourishing of every single dimension of life that this world has been corrupted by sin. And which is everything. Everything has been corrupted by sin. You know, everything dies, everything decays, everything rots away, everything breaks down. No matter how good something was at some point, it breaks down, right? So our relationship with God, our relationship with ourselves, relationships with each other, relationship with our environment, each and every one of them are fallen and they need God's rescue and salvation. When Jesus came, he says, I have come to give life and to give it abundantly. Later on in Revelation, he says, I am making all things new. Whatever was broken, whatever decays, whatever is dying and has died, making everything new. I am making everything new. Being a Christian means being somebody whose hope is in Jesus the King, who has come to redeem every single thing that has ever been fallen, and breathing into all things, into his resurrection life, his shalom. He's breathing into everything that's fallen. Jeremiah says, as God's people, you are to seek the shalom of the city, in which you are a stranger and an alien. But there's more. Second thing to notice here is that he says, pray for the city. Pray for the city. This is one of the concrete action items for the exiles. He says, pray to the Lord for the city, because if it prospers, you too will prosper. Prayer. Now, those of you who have any experience with prayer, you know what I'm talking about when I say prayer feels like one of the most helpless things that you can do. It seems futile many times. There's so much wrong in this world. There's so much injustice. There is so much suffering. There's so much neglect. And so when you see these things, what do you want to do? You want to roll up your sleeves and get to work and fix it. Fix it. Let's fix it. And you want to get into those places where kids are getting sick, and kids are getting uneducated, kids are getting unloved, and they're getting mistreated and abused, and you want to go and fix it. And but before you tell me to do that, you're telling me to pray. It seems futile. I'll tell you why prayer is so primary, it's so important for us. It helps us to be rescued from our Messiah complex. there are many do-gooders that descend upon the city to help out the poor folk in the city,
Wow.
right? And many of us are here tonight. You know, that's what we are doing here. We go to these desperate, broken places so that we can shine our light. You know, I'm here, and you know, everything's gonna be all right now. But we forget, I think, that we are not.